We're sisters, best friends, and authors on a mission to help you stoke your creative fire and live the life of your dreams. We believe that purpose fuels passion and that creativity is your secret weapon for mass construction. There's never been a better time to bless the world with your dream realized. You're listening to The Kate and Abbie Show.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of The Kate and Abbie Show. We're super stoked to see you here today. We're going to talk about how to start writing a book. This is a perfect episode if you are thinking about writing your first book ever. It's also a perfect episode if you are wondering how to start writing a new sort of book. Maybe you're embarking on a new adventure with a new novel, with a new series, something new that you haven't tried before. Maybe you're breaking into a new genre. So this is not just for people starting out for the first time ever writing a book. This is for anyone beginning any kind of writing project. You'll find some nuggets of gold in this podcast for you. This is something that we're both familiar with. In fact, if I can say it.
Go ahead. Say it.
I love how you already know what it is. Abbie and I just started writing a new series together. Boom. Boom. So you'll be seeing that in the future, hearing about that in the future, but that's all I'm going to say for now.
No spoilers, yeah.
No spoilers, but so it's interesting starting a project together. I feel like this is a good time for us to sink our teeth into this topic because we're both very seasoned writers. We've been writing for a long time, but now we're starting something new. And there are still nuances and differences, new things to explore because every writing project is different.
Right, exactly.
Whether you're writing by yourself or with somebody else.
So true.
It's been an interesting process to see how writing together, even though we understand each other's writing dynamics so well and they work together so well, it's just a different experience than writing by yourself. It's fun.
Yeah, it is. It's really interesting. And I love trying new things, especially new genres or new processes, because it brings back sort of that beginner's mindset of being able to enjoy something and explore something without just treating it like, oh, this is old hat. I've done this for a while now. I'm an expert at this, so I don't really need to think about what I'm doing. It kind of brings you into a new space where you can be an explorer again.
Yes.
For the first time again. Like, how did that? I often see people who will read a book that they really love that becomes like their favorite book ever, and they make this comment. I've seen a lot of people make this comment of, I wish I could go back and read it again for the first time and have that experience again.
I've always found that to be a really interesting comment.
Yeah, I have too. And I understand I understand that feeling. And I think that with a lot of writing, I feel the same way about like certain writing projects, and that a certain writing project that was really great, like, oh, I wish I could go back and like experience that euphoric feeling of writing something really awesome that I felt really proud of and experience that again. But you can actually do that through trying new things and stepping into maybe a new genre or a new type of book that you don't necessarily feel super confident, comfortable embarking on that journey. It is going to be an adventure, and that's part of what makes it really fun and cool.
It is, yeah, and not taking it too seriously, being willing to step out of your comfort zone and know that, hey, it's okay to explore new things and it's okay to feel like you don't know exactly what you're doing. That's how we learn.
Right.
So I think a lot of people, whether they're starting, like you said, a new genre that they've never written in before, or if they're starting to write a book for the first time ever, are going to wonder, where on earth do I begin?
Right.
In a practical sense, and also I think a mindset sense. So what are your thoughts on that? Like first steps if you're a first time writer?
First steps, I would say, is first make sure it matters to you and figure out why it matters to you, because that's going to be what pulls you through the entire writing process. It's going to be what animates you, what motivates you, and what gets you in front of your computer or your notebook on those slow, hard days when you don't feel like writing. It is going to propel you through those difficult days. And that is going to be at the heart of your story. It's going to be the heartbeat of your story. It's probably going to be the theme of your story as well. So knowing that from go, I think is a very important element. And I talk about that all the time on my channel. Knowing why it matters to you, making sure it matters to you. And then from there, going into the characters. Really, and I don't mean just like writing up sketches for them or character profiles for them, but like becoming the characters in a way. And really fleshing them out in your mind and creating these characters that you can really sink into and see the world of your story through their eyes.
Yeah.
I think is one of the most like important elements of storytelling. And of course, I could use all the technical language that I use to talk about all these things, but I don't even want to like say it in a technical way. Just becoming those characters, I think, is the most important thing.
Right. To really feel like you're in the character's skin.
Yeah.
Really feeling comfortable writing that character because that's what's driving your story forward, not the plot, not external conflict, but the internal conflict of your character. Yeah. And so if I agree with you, I think that's one of the most important aspects to concentrate on beyond structure, beyond world building, beyond all these other plot-oriented things, to really nail that character. Mm-hmm. Because even if your story doesn't have a lot going on in it, even if your story has other flaws, if you have a strong character, your readers will still fall in love with that character.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, how many stories have we watched together, films, books we've read, where some elements of the story is weak, but the character is strong that it's like you don't even really care that much. You're like, oh yeah, I guess that was a little weak, but you know, the character's so good.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
You fall in love with the characters, and then you would read or watch anything that happens to those characters. Doesn't matter if it is something really exciting and adventurous and perilous, or if it's something seemingly mundane.
Right.
And that is the magic of good character, like well-written characters. That is definitely the most important part of storytelling.
Exactly. Yeah, because like especially when you get into action adventure type of story, which is what I write, science fiction, action, fantasy, a little bit of like low fantasy stuff, you start getting repetitive with some of the things that are happening. I'm thinking of like Star Wars franchise, I'm thinking of the Marvel franchise here, but fans of these franchises are so dedicated to these films, to these stories, because they've connected with the character, and that's important. And I totally understand that concept as someone who has watched a lot of those films, and I also write in that genre, is that yes, repetitive things will happen if you're writing that genre of fiction, because, you know, okay, an action sequence, when it comes down to it, is going to feel a little repetitive sometimes when it's like urban action sequences. Yeah, they'll have a lot in common, but if you really nail that character, your reader or your viewer won't even care that they're kind of watching the same thing that they saw in the last movie, or the thing that they're reading the same sort of thing that they read in the last book, because they love the character.
Right. Yeah, and this is something that I've spent a lot of time, obviously, analyzing and trying to understand, and understand what is it about certain stories that make you love the characters so much that you would watch anything that happens to them, you would read anything that happens to them. And throughout these sequences, like you're saying, it doesn't matter if it's something super action oriented. You care so much about the characters themselves that you are just on the edge of your seat. So it's like, what is that magic element there? And what we both talk about all the time on the podcast and on my channel is that element is internal conflict. Really, it's essentially what is going on inside the character. What are their motivations? What is their agenda? What is their desire? And what is their fear? What is their flaw? What is their misbelief about the world? Knowing those things about the character and showing your reader those things is what makes your reader care about the character. They now feel like this is a person that they are familiar with, that they're friends with, and they know things about their backstory and where they come from and why they are the way they are today based on their past, based on their beliefs. And that is such a colorful, well-developed character that you now have this sense of connection to. You know, you have this like commitment to them and a loyalty to them, and you care about them. You don't necessarily have to like them or condone all their behavior, but you do care about them. And because you care about them, it makes everything else that happens important because it's important to the character. Therefore, it's important to you.
Right. I think that's such a great distinction that you just made, that you don't have to like the character in order to care about the character.
Yeah.
Because it's not necessary to make, I have to make every character likable. Not really. You just have to make us understand what their internal conflict is, understand what they're dealing with, what they're working with.
Yeah.
One of the things I think a lot of writers starting out wonder about when they start digesting some of the information out there in the writing universe is, as they embark on their first writing journey, how do they know whether they should be plotting or if they're more inclined to be a pantser, and how should they go about that? I've seen a lot of people who are like, what should I do here? People who end up being pantsers for a while, then are like, maybe I should be plotting. Maybe I should. How much should I be outlining? I think there's a lot of thoughts and questions about that.
Yeah, there are for sure. That is a huge topic in the writing world for sure. And my recommendation to all writers would be to outline at least somewhat so that you know generally where the story is going and that it's going in the direction of the character arc that you intend to write. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a positive character arc. It could be a negative character arc, but there has to be some sort of transformation, some sort of character journey, or else it's going to feel lackluster. It's going to feel like, what just happened? A bunch of stuff happened and I don't really know why any of it mattered. So if the character doesn't go on some sort of transformative journey, it's going to feel flat because it is flat. There's no arc, So being able to structure that arc ahead of time and at least see where you're going a little bit, even if not in super detail, just being able to see, okay, I know it's going to flow like this. That helps so much to keep your reader focused on what matters, to keep you focused on what matters when you're writing it, but also to keep your reader focused and to not let your plot meander all over the place,
Right, exactly. I think that's a great point. And as you start writing more, I think you get a better feel for what sort of outlining or plotting or lack thereof is right for you.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
You definitely have to find your own process.
Yeah, right.
Every writer has their own process.
And one of the things that I would say about it is it really doesn't matter anywhere near as much as you think it does when you first start out.
Yeah. Some people way overthink it, and then you get into like this procrastination instead of preparation.
Yes.
Because those two things can definitely be mistaken a lot. And now you've just become like so focused on preparing and making sure that you have your outline prepared and everything nailed down ahead of time that you end up not writing the book itself or being like too overly stressed out to write it because you're thinking so much about, what if it's not good anymore? You've kind of like intimidated yourself into a corner
right,
where you can't write because you're like so scared that you won't live up to your outline or your vision.
Exactly. Yeah. There is for sure an intimidation factor.
Yeah. And
when in doubt, just shrug it off and be like, you know what, it doesn't matter that much. And just start writing. And the thing is, you can go back and change stuff.
But you can't edit a blank page.
Exactly. You can't edit a blank page. That's so true. And for myself, I hardly plot at all. I usually start a book and I write 50,000 words or so before I even start making notes like, oh, okay, you know, this character feels like this about this, and I'll write a couple notes for myself in a document. But every process is different, and there's no right or wrong way to do it because it's art, and art has no rules. Like, I can't emphasize that enough, that it's more of an explorative process than it is like, oh, here's how you do it, here's how you don't do it. No one says that when a painter sits down at a canvas. It's like, do what you want.
Yeah.
Same thing with writing. If you don't want to write any notes, fine, don't. If you want to write a ton of notes, fine, do that. There's really no right or wrong way to do it. But just make sure it's what fits for you and what feels right for your story. And I think it will also differ from story to story because, like, for example, this series we started writing together, obviously there's a lot more plotting involved because you have two people writing one story. So there's a lot of collaboration, and I've written a good deal of like backstory for characters and stuff like that because suddenly now it's like, well, it has to not just be in my own head, it has to also be in Abbie's head, and we have to both be on the same page about different characters and their mindsets and what they're going through, what they think about that character, and what relationship that character has with that character, and how does that affect the plot moving forward. So there's a lot more plotting. So I think that's interesting because depending on what your writing project is, your process might be different.
Yeah.
So it's good to keep an open mindset about that, not like, oh, I do it this way.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that might change. That might go out the window with the next book. You never know. You know what I
mean? For sure. It's really it's really important to be open-minded on all of this. And as you were talking, I was thinking about like how you said explorative. It's an explorative process. And that's how I've kind of recognized your writing process to be, is like very explorative, in that it seems like you were just saying, how you start writing and then later on you make notes. It seems like going into this world that isn't quite created yet, and you're like creating it as you go, and you're like getting to know these people as they come alive in front of you, sort of thing.
Exactly.
Whereas my process is a bit more like I feel like I kind of step aside and like create it all ahead of time, and then like I step into the world that's already been like created and fleshed out. But some things still change.
Exactly.
Even like, I mean, this book that I'm currently writing, that not our book, but the other one, the Lighthouse book, is almost finished, and I'm like still adding details to the outline and changing things. And it's a process that I still do have like that explorative element, that some things are changing as I go, but I do obviously a lot of outlining ahead of time because that's just what I found works best for me. But I think what ends up being the process that works best for you is the one that makes you feel the most creative and free.
That's such a true statement. Yes, because that's the goal, is to feel liberated creatively.
Yeah.
Something that makes you want to sit down and write. If you have painted yourself into a process where you are actually dreading writing your book, give it up.
Yeah, or it feels like a chore.
Yeah.
You know, some people, it's outlining feels like a chore to them. For me, it's like, I can't wait to outline. I'm like,
wow.
I get like so excited to go write backstory and like,
well, see, and that
profiles.
matches your personality so well. That's one of the things that I think needs to be said for it, is that it will kind of depend on your personality.
Yeah.
Like, I am not a very organized person at all, and so it works for me. It feels more instinctively correct to just jump into the ether and let things materialize however they need to. Whereas for you, it's more like, no, I'm going to like organize this and have this battle plan going forward, because that's how you do a lot of other things.
Yeah.
So it makes so much sense to me that, you know, for someone who isn't used to that, maybe they're like, you know, oh, I don't have much of a structure, then it's going to feel weird to have like, oh, let's do this rigid structure. You might not like it. Yeah. If you're someone super structured, you might not like going into something without any plan. Right. So you have to really look at like, what do I actually like? You know, what do I actually gravitate toward? You know what I mean?
Yeah, 100%. That's going to affect your process. So if you like try to start writing a book and you had a bad experience because you were trying like somebody else's process, trying to fit a square peg into a round hole, so to speak, and you wanted to make this process work for you, but it didn't work for you, and then you had a bad experience, like, oh, maybe I can't write a book. That might not actually be true. It might just be that you were, using the wrong process. You were using a process that wasn't suited to you and your personality.
Right.
So I think that's a huge part of it, is finding your own process and finding what makes you feel free and the most creative.
Yeah. That's the most important thing, is to find something that clicks for you. Try a bunch of different things. And it's going to be the same with finding your voice in writing, which is another question that I hear people ask, like, how do I find my voice? How do I find my style? How do I not feel like I'm just copying or bouncing off of, springboarding off of other people's styles? Yes. And like, that's a tricky question to answer, but how I would like try to put it into words is that the only way you're going to find your style is to just keep doing you as much as possible. Mm-hmm. And then eventually you'll notice trends that surface, like, oh, I like to write about this. I like to write about this. I word things like that. I really like writing poetic prose, or I really like being short and sharp and blunt.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and getting to know the character too, because like you're saying, the voice, in my opinion, writing style or your writing voice should change based on what character you're writing, what book you're writing, and especially like if you're switching characters within the book, their points of view, like they should all feel a little bit different. They shouldn't all feel like you talking,
Exactly,
They should sound like their own person in a way.
Right.
So that's one of the fun elements, I think, of writing, is that explorative process of getting to know the characters and becoming them, like I was saying in the beginning. Mm-hmm. And that definitely carries over into your writing voice.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the voice is something that changes a lot. Mm-hmm. And it should change. It should be an ebb and flow process, especially if you're writing, like you were saying, first person, multiple point of views, or maybe one book you're writing this person here, and then the next book it's a completely different type of character, then they're going to sound different.
Right.
Like the last book in my series, The Blood Race, I wrote from 4 separate point of views, and each one was like stepping into a new skin. I used different words to describe things. I described things in different ways. You experience the same thing writing Weston versus Tessa in 100 Days of Sunlight. Talk about 2 vastly different voices, hugely different backgrounds, hugely different personalities, kind of polar opposite in some ways. Right. But that's part of what makes it fun, is you get to be whoever you want.
Yeah. It is. That's what definitely attracted me to writing in the first place, and one of the many things, and that's part of what makes the job so fun.
Yeah, it really is, because it's limitless. It's completely limitless. And to wrap it up, I think if you're starting a new book for the first time, you can sometimes be intimidated by this idea of like, how do I stick with it? How do I have the grit to be a writer? And I think that's a big thing, even for people who have written multiple books. And it's a present reality all the time when you're writing. How do you endure through days that are tougher than others, or parts of the process that are trickier than just the creative writing aspect, editing, rewriting, all that stuff? And I think it roots back to remembering why it matters.
Yes, for sure. Yeah. Back to the beginning again.
Back to the beginning, full circle.
The why it matters and why it matters to you specifically. Writing that down.
Like you always say, what's the truth you want to scream from the rooftops? Why does this story matter to you? Why is it important? And also recognizing that, hey, not every day is going to be this blissfully perfect writing day, and it doesn't need to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a lot of dream jobs, I like to say, a lot of dream jobs are boring because they they require doing the same thing over and over again. So if you ever feel like, oh, this is boring, this is tedious, I shouldn't feel this way about my writing, I must not be a real writer because I'm bored with writing. No, every real writer is bored with writing at some point, because boredom is a side effect of mastery. And if you're going to do something over and over and over again to get really good at it, you're going to get bored with it too. Like, that's just a given. It's true for professional figure skaters. It's true for doctors. It's true for writers. It's true for anybody who does something a lot and has to practice and work at it to get really, really good. It doesn't mean you don't love it, but it is going to be tedious. And so that's where the grit comes in.
Yeah.
You have to remind yourself, what is the dream? What is the impact I want to have on the world with this book? Who is the person out there that needs to read this? Because chances are you were that person once, and there's probably somebody out there like you who needs to read that, and it's going to really impact their life in a positive way. So stick with it.
And make some sort of vision board for yourself. If you're someone who likes visuals, have a vision board. Have a written little sign on your desk talking about why you're doing this and why it's important to you. And try to imagine what it will feel like when this book is finished, or whatever the ultimate thing you're working towards is, whether it's someone who needs to read the book reading it and it impacts them positively, whether it's you at a book signing. Have some sort of visual in your mind that will help on days when it's a little slower or a little more boring. You can call on that imagery and be like, you know what? This is worth it. This is worth the tough days. This is worth the slow days. And every writer experiences them. It's not exclusive to you. And it doesn't mean, oh, I shouldn't be doing this because this feels boring. Welcome to being a writer. Everybody feels that way sometimes. And it's part of the process. It's all part of the process.
Yeah, it is.
But yeah, I think we kind of went over a lot of different things to get you started on either writing your first book successfully or writing a new book, different genre, whatever. New projects are always fun.
Yes, they are. Huge topic, but I think we did tackle some of the first concerns that stop new writers from taking that first step.
Yeah, exactly. And we have a bunch of other great episodes for new writers, such as tackling how to have grit, how to, plotting versus pantsing, all that stuff. We have tons of episodes. We have over 50 something episodes of this show. So if you haven't watched any of those back episodes, go to my channel, click on my channel, go to the playlist and start listening to some of those episodes, because we go through a lot, and it's just going to inspire the heck out of you to write a book and stick with it and be happy and inspired. That's really what this show is all about, is inspiring you and propelling you forward in your own respective writing journey. Yeah. To wrap it up with a quote that I came across: be willing to be a beginner every single morning. And that's by Meister Eckhart. And I thought it was perfect, because even if you're a seasoned writer, it doesn't hurt to start your writing day with a beginner's mindset.
Yeah. I love that. It's such a good mindset to have, and it means you're always learning and you're always exploring and you're always getting better.
Very true.
So boom. Thank you guys so much for listening. If you liked this episode, hit the like button. If you're not on Kate's YouTube channel, check out the video version of this podcast. That is at youtube.com/KAEmmons. And thank you to our wonderful patrons who make this show possible. If you enjoy this show and you get value out of it, go to patreon.com/The Kate and Abbie Show and help us keep this podcast alive and free of interruptions. Until next week,
stay stoked
and rock on.